Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a story set in the cold silence of deep space, where an abandoned station drifts alone, forgotten by time, and soon to become humanity's last line of defense. When a terrifying alien force called the Whisperers threatens to wipe out what's left of mankind, a small team is sent on a desperate mission. Their goal? To find and activate an ancient weapon that could turn the tide of war. But here's the twist, it's not about firepower or high-tech gadgets or giant robots. This time, humanity's greatest hope rests on something so simple, so absurd, it almost feels like a joke. Of course, this wouldn't be a human story without a little sarcasm, awkwardness, and stubborn brilliance along the way. Because when the odds are impossible, that's exactly when humans get creative and hilarious, without even trying. Make sure to stick around until the end because their journey will remind us all, humanity always finds a way even when the whole universe seems to stand against us. Before we dive any deeper, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Your support means the world to us. Thank you so much. Now let's jump into the adventure. Space was quiet. Not peaceful, not beautiful, just empty. A cold, endless silence stretching across the black. And right in the middle of that silence drifted Eclipse Station. It didn't look like a fortress or a beacon of hope. It looked like a corpse, half-eaten by time and forgotten by everything that once cared. It wasn't even on any official maps anymore. Eclipse Station had been abandoned for so long that even its creators had probably stopped pretending it ever existed. At least until humanity got desperate enough to remember. It all started 3 weeks ago, during a routine deep space survey of Sector Delta 5. A group of half-asleep cartographers, scanning starfields and eating rehydrated noodles, stumbled across a strange energy signature. Something ancient, something dormant. When the analysts dug deeper, the rumor spread faster than a cheap energy drink on a mining colony. Eclipse Station still had power. And maybe, just maybe, it was hiding something powerful enough to turn the war around. The Whisperers were coming. Humanity wasn't just losing, we were evaporating. Whole colonies fell without a sound, ships vanishing before they could even fire back. If Eclipse Station held anything that could save us, we had no choice but to grab it, or die trying. Colonel Janes didn't look particularly thrilled when she was briefed. Then again, she never looked particularly thrilled about anything, except maybe getting through a meeting without stabbing someone. "We're sending you and a small recon unit to secure Eclipse Station," the brass had told her. "Minimal resistance expected," they said. "Mostly abandoned," they said. "Should be easy," they said. Of course, the same people had said minimal resistance right before the Pluto incident, where an entire battalion had been eaten by sentient ice worms. So, grain of salt. Now, strapped into a dropship rumbling through the void, Colonel Janes and her team sat in heavy silence. Each of them wrapped in thick, armored suits that smelled like sweat, regret, and government budget cuts. There was Lieutenant Ramirez, fidgeting with his wrist console like he could somehow hack his way out of this mission. Private Singh, muttering prayers under her breath in at least 3 different languages, just in case one of them worked. And Chief Engineer Hollis, staring out the viewport with a flat expression that could only be described as emotionally checked out. Hollis said, voice crackling through the comms, "If this turns out to be an alien death trap, I hope someone at least makes a meme out of it." Humanity, still touching weird buttons in 2487. Colonel Janes didn't even blink. "If we die, Hollis," she said dryly, "you're nominated to be the punchline." The dropship shuddered as it entered Eclipse Station's gravity well. Ahead of them, the station grew larger, a broken wheel of dead metal spinning slowly against the stars. Lights flickered randomly across its battered hull, like the last neurons firing in a dying brain. Parts of the outer shell were torn open, exposing inner corridors like gaping wounds. There was something wrong about it, something that made even seasoned soldiers like Janes feel a cold knot twist in their gut. As they closed in, the external sensors screamed warnings. Unstable atmosphere pockets, radiation spikes, structural weaknesses. In other words, everything you'd expect from a place humanity had wisely decided to abandon a century ago. The dropship docked with a teeth-grinding groan of metal against metal. Locks hissed. Bolts slammed into place. One by one, the team disembarked, boots clanging on the deck plates. Inside, Eclipse Station was worse. The air was stale, filled with the bitter tang of old ozone and something else. Something that smelled like fear baked into steel. Flickering emergency lights cast long, stuttering shadows down endless, crumbling hallways. Every footstep echoed too loud, like they were walking into a cathedral built for dead gods. Private Singh tightened her grip on her weapon. I really don't like this place, she muttered. Ramirez chuckled dryly. Oh, come on. What's the worst that could happen? Maybe we get turned into alien fertilizer. Maybe we get vaporized by a cursed computer program. Maybe we open a door and find something worse. Chief Hollis tapped his helmet thoughtfully. Personally, I'm rooting for cursed computer. Less messy. Colonel Janes didn't say anything. She just raised her hand, signaling the team to move forward. This was no longer a mission. This was a race against extinction, and the starting gun had already fired. Whatever was waiting in the heart of Eclipse Station, humanity was about to find out. The only real question left was, would they survive long enough to use it? The first warning came as a whisper through the static. An eerie, drawn-out distortion that crawled over the comm system, like the station itself was trying to tell them something, and choking halfway through. Private Singh flinched, tapping her helmet. Is that normal? She asked, half hoping someone would lie. No, Chief Hollis answered flatly. But if it helps, nothing about this mission is normal, so technically, yes. Colonel Janes brought up her wrist display, her eyes narrowing. Blips were starting to appear on the motion sensors, dozens of them. Small at first, but growing, shifting, closing in. They moved like liquid shadows across the void. No defined shapes, no engines, no weapons visible. Just mist. Hungry, creeping mist. Contact, Janes announced, her voice calm enough to make a funeral director jealous. On the surface, Eclipse Station remained silent. But above them, in the dead vacuum, the Whisperers had arrived. They weren't ships, at least not in the traditional sense. Each one was a writhing mass of condensed vapor, flickering with hints of something darker inside. Something watching, thinking, waiting. Are we sure those are enemies? Ramirez asked, squinting at the display. Hollis leaned over. You ever seen friendly mist clouds come knocking at your front door in the middle of space? Ramirez shrugged. In my defense, I grew up on Mars. We were taught to be polite to hallucinations. Then it started. Out on the fringes of the station's perimeter, the first human scout ships blinked out, not exploded, not destroyed. Just erased, as if someone had decided to highlight and delete them from existence. The comms channels filled with screams, bursts of static, panic babble. Then nothing. Inside Eclipse Station, the team froze. Even Ramirez stopped cracking jokes. Private Singh whispered a prayer, but the colonel shot her a look so sharp it practically sliced the air. No noise, Janes ordered, voice low but cutting. They hear you. It took Singh half a second too long to realize Janes didn't mean with ears. The Whisperers didn't hunt by sight or sound. They hunted by thought. By the vibrations of emotion, the ripples of fear and panic that humans bled out without even realizing it. The more you thought, the more you felt. The more they knew exactly where you were. And right now, standing in a crumbling metal hallway that resonated every heartbeat like a drum solo, the team was basically a neon sign blinking. Free food here. Great, Hollis muttered under his breath. So our battle plan is to be emotionally dead inside. Should have brought my last breakup playlist. Janes ignored him. She was too busy calculating, how far could they move without alerting the mist? How much time did they have before it reached them? The answer, judging by the speed those sensor blips were closing in, was not much. Without a word, Janes motioned the team forward. They moved as silently as they could, stepping over fallen beams and shattered glass, each noise like a gunshot in the endless hush. The station around them groaned under the strain of its own decay. Somewhere far off, something metal shrieked and collapsed. They kept moving, passing skeletal remains of old maintenance drones and doors half melted by ancient plasma burns. And then the lights started to die. One by one, the emergency strips along the walls sputtered out, plunging them into pockets of thick, unnatural darkness. It wasn't random. It was strategic. The Whisperers were cutting off their senses, hurting them, tightening the noose. Ramirez broke the silence with a whisper, half joking, half hysterical. So, the plan is to just awkwardly shuffle around and pretend we're not delicious, right? Brilliant strategy. No pretending, Hollis replied in his usual deadpan. You are awkward. Just embrace it. A low rumble vibrated through the floor as the mist breached the outer layers of the station. It was close now. Close enough that the air itself seemed heavier, clinging to their suits, sliding down their backs like cold oil. They needed the weapon, the silent strike array. And they needed it fast. Because every second they lingered, the Whisperers got a little closer. Every stray thought, every flicker of doubt, was another beacon flashing out into the dark. Colonel Janes glanced back at her team, exhausted, terrified, barely holding it together. But still moving. Still fighting. In the dead silence of Eclipse Station, humanity wasn't finished yet. Not even close. And as long as they could keep their minds quiet, they still had a chance. The heart of Eclipse Station was supposed to be some grand control center. Gleaming panels, cutting-edge tech, holographic displays humming with alien brilliance. Instead, it looked like a gutted museum. Broken consoles littered the floor like toppled tombstones. Cables hung from the ceiling like dead vines. And right in the middle of it all, stood a single, untouched artifact. A circular platform, no larger than a dinner table, humming softly. It was ancient. Older than any Earthborn tech by at least a few hundred years. And somehow, despite the wreckage all around it, it was pristine, as if even time had been too scared to touch it. Colonel Jane stepped forward cautiously, scanning it with her wrist console. The data that came back made no sense. No active energy output. No weapon signatures. No radiation spikes. Just a blank, maddening void. "Well," said Hollis, peering over her shoulder, "good news, it's either a miracle weapon, or the world's most stubborn coffee table." Ramirez snorted. "I'd kill for coffee right now." Singh didn't laugh. She was too busy keeping an eye on the growing mist outside the shattered windows. The whispers were closing in. Fast. Janes tapped the console again, bringing up a fragment of a translation pulled from the ancient station logs. It was short. Brutally simple. Silent strike array, activated through absence. Victory through void. Silence. Absence. Void. The weapon didn't run on power. It didn't fire missiles. It didn't generate force fields or laser beams. Listened. It amplified the absence of presence, erasing the psychic noise that the whisperers hunted. It turned humans into ghosts, invisible to their predators. But only if they could completely suppress every trace of thought, fear, hope, regret, anything that could vibrate out into the ether. "Cool," said Hollis, clapping his gloved hands together. "Our survival now depends on us being dead inside." "Fantastic." Colonel Janes turned to face her team, expression sharp. "We're activating it," she said. "But if you so much as sneeze, think too loudly, or daydream about tacos, we're all dead." There was a long pause. Ramirez raised a finger. "Quick question. What if I accidentally daydream about tacos? I mean, I'm not planning to, but—" "Suppress it," Janes snapped. "And if you can't, imagine being vaporized. That should help." Private Singh let out a tight breath. "We'll have to meditate. Clear our minds. Total control." Hollis tilted his head. "So basically, we need to achieve spiritual enlightenment, in the next 5 minutes, under life-threatening stress." He paused, then added with zero enthusiasm. "Sounds easy." Janes began configuring the platform, working as quickly as she could. Small glyphs lit up around the edges, pulsing in slow rhythm, almost like a heartbeat trying to lull them into calm. The problem was humans weren't wired for calm. Especially not when death was literally breathing down their necks. Already, the mist outside was battering against the external shields. Tiny fractures appeared in the glass. The whispers could smell their emotions leaking out, like blood in the water. They were running out of time. "All right," Jane said, voice low and even. "We have one shot at this." "Question," Ramirez said again, his voice almost perfectly deadpan. "Are we legally allowed to punch each other if it helps achieve inner peace?" "Use your own judgment," Janes replied without blinking. Singh closed her eyes and began whispering a prayer under her breath, until Janes gave her a look that immediately shut her up. No noise. No thought. Just void. Hollis sat cross-legged on the cold metal floor, staring blankly into the distance. He looked so convincingly empty-headed that for a second, Janes considered promoting him. As Janes keyed in the final sequence, the silent strike array shuddered once, then grew still. The hum deepened, sinking into their bones. The lights dimmed. The air itself seemed to pause, thick, heavy, expectant. The station's presence, the human team's very existence, began to thin out. The whispers outside slowed, confused. Their predatory senses, once razor-sharp, were beginning to slip. It was working. But only barely. One stray thought, one spike of fear, and it would all come crashing down. Colonel Janes took one last look at her team, every face locked in stoic, awkward silence. The worst kind of silence. The kind that could save the universe, or doom it. And the game had just begun. Inside Eclipse Station's crumbling command deck, time seemed to stop. The silent strike array hummed beneath their boots, pulsing like the heartbeat of some sleeping giant. Colonel Janes knew exactly how thin the margin was. If even one of them slipped, let a rogue thought spark, let an emotion ripple out, the whispers would crash through them like a tidal wave. The countdown had begun, 15 minutes until the station's automated life support systems collapsed. After that, the whole place would turn into a frozen tomb, taking them, and humanity's last hope, with it. No pressure. All right, Jane said quietly, addressing her team. We need absolute stillness. No thoughts. No feelings. Nothing. Ramirez raised a hand hesitantly, like a kid about to ask if bathroom breaks were allowed during an apocalypse. What about, involuntary thoughts? Like if I suddenly remember that time I called my teacher Mom, in 3rd grade? Hollis didn't even look up. Suppress it, he said flatly. Bury it. Forget you even existed. Private Singh closed her eyes, inhaled slowly and mumbled, "This is fine. Everything is fine. Definitely not having a breakdown. Positive thinking still counts as thinking," Jane's reminded her, voice sharper than a plasma blade. To practice, they spread out around the room, setting up a crude training drill that Hollis had sarcastically dubbed Extreme Awkwardness Survival Boot Camp. The rules were simple. No speaking. No reacting. No thinking too loudly. If you made a noise, cracked a smile, or even visibly twitched, you lost. Ramirez and Singh squared off first, standing nose to nose. Staring. Breathing. Seconds stretched into minutes. A bead of sweat rolled down Singh's forehead, but she didn't dare wipe it away. Ramirez, meanwhile, developed a sudden, overpowering need to sneeze. His nostrils flared, his face contorted in desperate internal struggle. Janes, watching from the sidelines, shook her head with the kind of slow disappointment usually reserved for bad reality TV contestants. If you sneeze and summon a death cloud, she muttered, you're cleaning it up. Meanwhile, Hollis sat cross-legged in the corner, completely still. He wasn't meditating. He wasn't transcending. He just looked like someone who had mentally checked out of the entire situation and was now staring into the existential abyss, and finding it boring. How's Hollis doing it? Singh whispered, barely moving her lips. Decades of emotional repression, Ramirez whispered back. Impressive, really? Janes ignored them. There was no time left for amateur hour. Out in the void, the whispers had begun pressing against the station's external hull. Tiny fractures spiderwebbed across the windows. The whole structure groaned under the assault, a deep aching sound that vibrated up their legs and rattled their teeth. A direct hit would splinter the station apart like wet paper. The silent strike array pulsed again, louder this time. It was ready. It just needed them to be ready too. Janes gathered the team in a tight circle around the platform. This is it, she said. From this moment on, you must not exist. Ramirez tilted his head slightly. In an existential sense, or emotionally, mentally, spiritually, Janes cut him off. Basically, pretend you're at a family dinner and someone brings up politics. There was a brief, strangled snort from Singh that almost got them all killed. But she bit it back, eyes wide with panic, and nodded vigorously. One by one they closed their eyes. Focused inward. Tried to kill every scrap of noise inside their heads. The whispers breached the outer defenses. A low, chilling wind howled through the ventilation shafts, carrying with it the icy stink of annihilation. 10 minutes left. The mist seeped into the halls now, creeping closer, tendrils questing for anything, any hint of life, emotion, thought. A single heartbeat too loud, a single memory too vivid would be enough. The silent strike array flared, sensing the danger, waiting for the humans to match its perfect, horrifying stillness. Janes emptied herself. No anger. No fear. No hope. Just silence. Just void. Around her she felt her team doing the same, some more gracefully than others. Hollis was practically a professional statue. Ramirez looked like he was dying inside from sheer effort. Singh vibrated faintly like a bottle of soda about to explode. But somehow, it held. The mist floated past the windows, confused. The whisperers slowed, drifting uncertainly. And then, in a flash, the station seemed to vanish from their perception, as if Eclipse Station had never existed at all. The silent strike array activated fully. A deep, resonant silence fell over everything, swallowing the station whole. For the first time since the war had begun, humanity was invisible. And the clock kept ticking. The command deck was drowning in darkness and silence. The silent strike array pulsed steadily beneath their feet, anchoring the entire station in an unnatural stillness that almost hurt to feel. The mist had fully breached the station now. Tendrils of vapor curled through broken corridors and shattered doorways, seeking life, seeking anything. But they found nothing. No heartbeats, no fears, no thoughts. Only cold, dead air. Outside the viewport, the Whisperers floated uncertainly. The great masses of mist seemed to waver in place, coiling and recoiling as if confused. Colonel Janes watched them closely, barely breathing. This was the moment everything hinged on. If even one of them slipped now, if even one thought or feeling leaked into the void, the illusion would shatter and death would be instantaneous. One of the Whisperers drifted closer, pressing against the cracked glass. Its form twisted like smoke, fighting against an invisible barrier it could not understand. Hollis observed it from the corner of his eye, with a kind of dry fascination. He leaned ever so slightly toward Ramirez and whispered in a voice so flat it could have been mistaken for machine static. "Finally," he said. "A situation where my complete emotional detachment is an asset." Ramirez nodded very slowly. "Dead inside has finally paid off," he whispered back. Private Singh squeezed her eyes shut tighter. A bead of sweat rolled down her temple, but she made no move to wipe it away. She knew better than to risk it now. Janes remained a statue. Her mind, an empty room. Her heart, a silent void. The Whisperers began to shift uneasily. Some spun slowly in the void as if searching for a prey that had vanished. Then the first sign of real panic. Two Whisperers collided mid-drift, tendrils wrapping around each other like frantic snakes. Without the psychic signals they fed on, they turned on each other. One dissolved into the other with a flash of pale green light. Another recoiled, smashing into the station walls and fracturing its own form into glittering shards. The silent strike array pulsed again. Deeper now, more profound. Erasing every last hint of human presence from the battlefield. The Whisperers were starving. Blinded. Driven mad by a hunger they could not explain and a prey they could no longer perceive. They began to destroy themselves. In the command deck, the human team stayed perfectly still, watching the chaos unfold in slow, terrifying beauty. Ships that had once seemed unstoppable, monsters that had devoured colonies, now cannibalized each other in blind confusion. One by one, the Whisperers disintegrated. Some collapsed into clouds of inert gas. Others simply vanished as their energy forms destabilized and unraveled. It was not a glorious battle. There were no explosions, no gunfire, no triumphant charges. Only silence. Pure absolute. And humanity holding its breath. As the last Whisperer imploded in a swirl of dying mist, Hollis exhaled very slowly, barely a whisper of air. He tilted his head toward Janes and said in his driest voice yet, "So, to recap, we saved humanity by doing absolutely nothing better than anyone else ever has." Colonel Janes allowed herself the faintest twitch of a smile, the first sign of emotion she had shown in hours. "Not nothing," she replied. "Perfect awkward nothing." Private Singh opened one eye cautiously. Ramirez let his shoulders sag with relief, so slowly it looked like he was deflating. The silent strike array dimmed, its purpose fulfilled. The Whisperers were gone. Eclipse Station, though battered and broken, still stood. And humanity, silent, awkward, and very much alive, had won a battle that would be remembered, not with songs, but with a silence deeper than any ocean. The battle was over. The station was still standing. The silent strike array had done its job. And for the first time in what felt like 1,000 years, the crew could breathe without feeling like every exhale might be their last. Colonel Janes allowed herself to take off her helmet. The air was thin and metallic, but breathable. Good enough for survivors. The others followed suit, armor clanking as they peeled themselves free from their shells. For a long moment, no one spoke. They just stood there, staring at each other, still stunned by what they had just pulled off. Then, predictably, Ramirez broke the silence. "All right," he said in a slow drawl. "Which one of you cowards farted during the meditation drill?" Private Singh looked genuinely offended. "I was busy suppressing existential dread, thank you very much." Chief Hollis did not even blink. "If you must know," he said flatly, "I weaponized my bodily functions as an additional layer of psychological warfare." "You're welcome." Janes pinched the bridge of her nose. Part of her wanted to yell. Part of her wanted to laugh. Mostly she just wanted a shower and 12 hours of sleep. They moved through the battered corridors of Eclipse Station, making notes, taking scans, mapping what was salvageable and what would need to be blown into space. It was a wreck. But it was their wreck now. Somewhere deep in the station core, life support systems coughed back into minimal operation. Lights flickered to half-life. Recycling units churned ancient dust into breathable air. It was not much, but it was a start. Janes paused in front of a shattered control console, her boots crunching over broken glass. With a heavy sigh, She activated her wrist comm and began dictating the official report. Mission log, Colonel Tessa Janes, Operation Eclipse Retrieval. She paused, considering her words carefully. Recommendation for future engagements. Adopt awkward silence superior warfare protocol as a standard tactic against psychic predatory species. Another pause. Additionally, advise against allowing team members to consume bean rations before psychic stealth operations. For obvious reasons. In the background, Ramirez and Singh were still arguing about who had broken first during the meditation phase. Technically, you thought about tacos, Ramirez was insisting. That's a thought. You endangered the entire mission for imaginary food. And you thought about your cat back on Earth, Singh snapped. How is that better? Hollis walked past them, completely deadpan. I thought about nothing. As usual. You are amateurs. When they finally returned to Earth Command for debriefing, the mood was celebratory. Sort of. The generals wanted a triumphant hero moment. The room was packed with brass, cameras, and a handful of politicians who had probably never seen a day of real combat in their lives. As the team stood there in full gear, exhausted and mildly traumatized, someone started clapping. Slow, hesitant applause, meant to be inspiring, but landing with the grace of a drunk giraffe. The team just stared back, silent, expressionless. It was not a rebellion. It was not disrespect. They were just completely and utterly done with making noise. An awkward silence ballooned in the room, stretching out into something massive and terrible. Finally, Hollis leaned toward Janes and muttered out of the side of his mouth, "Maybe we broke them too." Janes did not smile, but her eyes twitched in the way that meant she was dangerously close. Eclipse Station would be repaired slowly over the next few months. It would become a secret bastion for humanity, a hidden fortress against whatever else the universe decided to throw at them. And deep within its core, the silent strike array would remain. Silent, waiting, ready. Colonel Janes stood on the observation deck one last time, looking out at the stars swirling past. In the end, they had won. Not by shouting louder, not by building bigger guns, but by doing what humanity did best when cornered. Getting weird, getting awkward, and surviving anyway. She tapped the glass once with her gloved knuckle, a small sound swallowed by the vastness of space. Victory, it turned out, had never sounded so much like absolutely nothing. Eclipse Station survived, barely. It still creaked like an old man's knees every time the artificial gravity flickered, and the lights still played their favorite game of guess which hallway is haunted today. But it was alive, and so were they. Colonel Janes sat in what passed for a command chair now, which was really just a salvaged cafeteria stool duct taped to the deck. She stared out through the cracked viewport at the stars. Behind her, the team bickered quietly, because naturally, victory did not erase basic human tendencies, like arguing over who left the last ration bar melting next to the reactor core. I am just saying, Ramirez said, holding up a half-melted silver wrapper. There are rules about food safety even during galactic war. Singh threw her hands up. For the last time, it was not me. Besides, it is basically just protein goo now. You are welcome. Hollis lounged against a wall, arms crossed, the living embodiment of someone who had run out of patience somewhere around 3 battles ago. Congratulations, he said dryly. You survived an extinction-level event only to die of expired snack bars. Truly humanity's finest hour. Janes did not turn around. She just smiled faintly to herself and tuned them out. This was normal. This was human. And weirdly, this was comforting. The silent strike array had been powered down but kept on standby, just in case something worse decided to come knocking. Because if there was anything the universe had taught them, it was that there was always something worse out there, lurking just past the next star. Still, for now, they had time. Time to rebuild. Time to breathe. Time to argue about snack bars and who snored the loudest during silent meditation drills. According to Hollis, it was Ramirez by a mile. Ramirez naturally accused Singh, who in turn suggested that Hollis simply dreamed too loudly and blamed everyone else. Colonel Janes, who had spent half the mission contemplating creative new ways to mute her entire squad, chose not to weigh in. Sometimes, leadership was about knowing when to intervene, and when to let natural selection run its course. They held a small ceremony later that day, because apparently, after saving the species, somebody thought a proper debrief deserved snacks and lukewarm coffee. The ceremony consisted mostly of Janes grunting a vague approval, Hollis muttering sarcastic acceptance speeches under his breath, Ansing trying very hard not to cry when the old Earth flag was raised over the station's battered communications tower. Ramirez said a few words too. Something about tacos and survival and the human spirit being a lot like poorly made duct tape. Sticky, messy, and somehow holding everything together anyway. Nobody really knew if that was inspiring or just weird, but it felt right at the time. Later, Janes found herself alone again, walking the perimeter of the station, boots clanging on ancient metal, trailing her fingers lightly along the walls still scarred from old battles. She stopped at one broken window, where the stars spilled in like silent watchers. She thought about everything they had done, all the screaming silences they had endured, all the times it would have been easier to give up, to be loud, to be seen, to be destroyed. Instead, they had adapted. They had embraced awkward silence, weaponized their weirdness, and turned humanity's greatest weakness, messy, chaotic stubbornness, into an unexpected victory. Janes chuckled under her breath. Not loudly, just enough to fog up the inside of her cracked helmet. "We survived," she muttered, with awkward silences and passive-aggressive teamwork, and somehow that was enough. In the end, it always was. It was not the flashiest triumph, not the kind of thing that would inspire statues or epic songs, but it was human. It was real. It was stubborn and awkward and glorious in the only way that mattered. They were still here, still standing, still human. And if the galaxy had a problem with that, well, it could take a number and get in line. Colonel Janes straightened up, adjusted her battered gear, and turned back toward her team, who were now arguing about whether the station cafeteria should stock more coffee or more instant noodles. Priorities, after all. Humanity would rebuild. They would fight. They would laugh inappropriately at the wrong times. And most importantly, they would survive. One awkward moment at a time. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe to this channel, and let us keep exploring the galaxy together.